welcome all to the Brighteye Edtech Startup Festival. And thanks for joining us this afternoon, day 2 of the week, all exciting. Today, we're diving into communications, marketing, and sales with one session earlier today, all recorded and to be shared, covering strategies, budgets, and KPIs. And the other one, this one, looking at building public profile and securing media coverage for all the good work you're doing. My name is Hege, and I am head of community at Brighteye Ventures. We are the most active EdTech-focused VC fund in Europe, with interests spanning in the sector from early years to lifelong learning and everything in between. We partner with companies across Europe on your early stages, supporting you in pre-seed, seed, and Series A, with both investment and thematic support where we can be most helpful. So the inspiration for creating this festival came from that work. We're very proud to present some of the best experts in the industry, contributing this week with their knowledge and experience on a number of topics relevant to building and growing your startups. Right here and right now, we tune in on building public profile, mainly through media coverage and partnerships. And I'm made up to be joined by Angela Jameson, editorial director at Burlington PR, a leading tech and venture PR agency. Angela will get us started with the presentation before joined on the panel by Christina Marcos, head of global events, PR and media at Genially, focused on building with Media Invest, and Marie Takei, who is a founder and CEO who's been great at creating profile for Iconoclast. I'll ask them to introduce themselves a little bit more in detail when we get to that. Unfortunately, journalist Natasha Mascarenhas from TechCrunch, who was meant to be joining us, has been prevented last minute, but I'm very confident, however, that the speakers we are joined by will deliver fantastic value this afternoon. We hope also there'll be some helpful conversations and connections made by all of you. Please feel free to add your questions and comments in the chat. And in the events we've had so far, we've decided not to do breakout rooms and rather involve the attendees in the conversation. So we'll see how we play this one. So why not get started? I will leave the stage to Angela.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Hege. And it's really, really nice to be joining you this afternoon. I come across EdTech every day in my life as a parent, which I'm sure you do. And I'm really hoping to see lots of examples of better EdTech. So I'm really pleased to connect with startup companies because I'm sure you're all building products that are a lot better than the things that our kids are currently using. So a little bit about me. I'm the editorial director of Burlington, which is a specialist PR agency based in London, but covering all of Europe for startups, scale-ups, and the VC industry. So we cover a range of clients from VC firms, including Balderson Capital, Highland Europe, Local Globe, climate tech funds like Kiko Ventures and World Fund. We have a range of VC investor clients, and then we also have a range of startup businesses that we work with very closely, whether on a project basis or a retained basis. And so some of the businesses that I'm currently working with are Voy Technology, which is an e-scooter company, not really a startup anymore, but I have been working with them since they were a startup. Lots of health tech companies, including recently a health tech company in the health space, in the mental health space, called HelloSelf. We work with Ecosia, which is a rival to Google. Again, not so much a startup, but we've been with them since the early days. Hege is kindly helping me with the slides today, so it might be a little bit lumpy, but if you go to the second slide, Hege, I can tell you a little bit about how Burlington approaches PR, and that's also to do with my background as well. I was one of the very first employees at Burlington, and I got together with Nadia Kelly, who's the founder. She comes from a very conventional PR background, worked in telecoms and tech in the early days for lots of large agencies, and then went in-house at Index Ventures. And then we met each other, and I joined to having had a long background as a journalist. And really the point about Burlington and the way we help our clients is that we want to get really good quality stories to the media, and that's the best way, I believe, to raise your profile. We think that, you know, if you put rubbish in, you get rubbish out. So we work really hard with companies to build their stories, tell it in the best possible way, and that's why, you know, I enjoy what I'm doing, because I meet people like you and the companies that you work with who are innovative and creative, and I want to sort of explain what it is that you're doing, the impact that you might be able to make to the rest of the world. So how bothered should you be about media coverage? Sorry, Hagar, this is my first slide, but you know, if great media coverage gets you attention, it also helps you to build trust and credibility in your product. And I think, you know, you're probably aware of that, otherwise you probably wouldn't be here today. But one of the other things that we do at Burlington is that we're really keen to make sure that you're connecting to your marketplace and that your business objectives are served at the same time. I really, really love spending a lot of time talking to journalists and working with them on stories, but it doesn't really work if the CEO is really cross about the way they're quoted on a Saturday morning. You know, that hasn't fulfilled the objective. Obviously, we don't just sort of scatter stories willy-nilly. We want them to really land in the influential titles where the audiences that you need to reach are going to be reading. So that there are lots of things that go into doing that, and it means that you have to choose the right time to talk to your media. You have to find something newsworthy to say, and sometimes you have to keep your powder dry until you're ready to say something. You've got to work out which audiences you need to reach, and you need to think about really closely about why you're doing it. I mean, some of the reasons the companies that we work with tell us that they want PR is, one, their investors say they should be spending money on PR. That's probably the worst reason, because then you'll just rush in and go and spend money, and it's not necessarily going to be helping you build your business. Better reasons for this are you need potential hires to know all about you. So you want this great piece of coverage so that when you're recruiting, somebody goes away and reads just exactly what it is that you're trying to do, and then they can start to think about if it's a place that they can work at and if they can contribute. And ideally, when they come in to meet you and interview with you, they've got a good idea of whether they're going to fit and whether they can contribute something. Perhaps you're entering a really crowded marketplace, and we have recently worked with lots of on-demand delivery companies, which have been all over London and probably lots of other places in Europe. And they all needed to differentiate themselves and explain what they did very, very quickly. So there was a sort of frantic rush of PR, lots of stories about the most popular products in London and how quickly you could get your late night drinks. And, you know, really each business was trying to differentiate itself and spending quite a lot of money in the process, actually. Another reason might be that you're a very disruptive company, or that you have extremely difficult technology. Some companies in this space that we've worked with are actually in the quantum field, and it's very hard work explaining what quantum physics, quantum computing to generalists and non-specialist journalists. But we're always trying to bring the new technologies of the future to the people that are covering our sector. So then we need to talk to you about what's the best way to approach seeking media coverage. Journalists spend their whole lives telling stories, and the thing that you need to think about is not just giving them a list of tech specs or things that you're great at or financial facts. You actually need to craft a story. And for some people, you know, their first story is very much about, you know, their reason for starting the business. It could be, you know, a great founder story, a great creation story. We've all seen some of those and we really love them. But the other times there may be, you know, you have an unusual solution to a global problem. We've recently been doing sort of coverage for a startup on that has you know, various meat-free feeds for animals, and we have to sort of explain why you know, feeding chickens from protein that comes from a non animal source is actually going to be the solution to climate change. Not necessarily an immediate link, but that's the sort of storytelling that professional writers and PRs will specialize in, and that's why you might turn to a specialist agency to do that. So what is storytelling? Storytelling is bringing a company to life. It's a way of connecting with audiences. It's giving story ideas and angles to journalists, helping them to find the thing that fascinates them about your business, because that's what they really want to do. They really want to they're like, uncovering pearls, digging for gold in the dirt, basically. They're all looking for little nuggets, and sometimes we can help them find them. Mostly we help them find them, and that can be providing high quality words, exciting quotes, putting together information or data in a way that makes them think and connects to a bigger issue. So PR consultants can advise you on how best to approach journalists and what sort of content that they're going to need to bring your story to life. Now, when you're starting to talk to an agency, before you even do that, there are lots of things that you can do to sort of give yourself a head start. I mean, you should ask yourself some important questions. Hager, if you move on to the next slide. And basically, you need to think about what you want to say to the audience that you're trying to reach. Does that message change for different audiences? Who are the key audiences? Key audiences that we typically see are investors, people working in the tech sector, policymakers, other members of the ecosystem and network. So, a really good way to work out what it is that you want to say is think about how you'd explain this to your mum or to a mate in the pub. A news editor once said to me early in my career, a news story is the thing that you rush into the pub to say and yell at the barman, the information you really want to convey to him. And that's not ordering a round of drinks. So you've got to develop the messages that resonate. If you move on to the next slide, I think you'll recognize this. Tech is an extremely complicated area. And obviously, I'm talking very generally, but we are covering any range of businesses, from a consumer tech business that would eventually compete with the likes of Tesco or Asda, to name two of the biggest supermarkets in the UK, right through to business-to-business software, niche software. So you need to make your story connect. And because you're in education, more than ever, you've got a chance to really, every person will go through education. A lot of people will become parents and see it from the other point of view. So you've got a way of, and then equally, if you're working in business and it's corporate education, there's an awful lot of people will have had some kind of exposure to that, although not journalists. Journalists are really badly trained and rarely they just don't understand corporate education because they never get any. So journalists, they fundamentally, they think they get education. So you're starting from a really strong place, but then you do need to think about how you make your story relevant to the different people that are covering it to them. And one thing that senior journalists have said to me since I've been working in PR is, why do you come with so much jargon to us? And I was like, well, it's not my fault, but these guys they're like, for instance, I've got a financial services client right now who wants to talk about algorithms. It's very difficult to deflect them from that, but we need to take out all the jargon with you, and we will push you on that. We'll constantly ask you, why are you using those words? Please simplify your language and really explain it as if you were talking to someone not much older than a child. But you can give yourself a great head start by crafting that headline that you'd love to see, thinking, what's the TechCrunch headline you really want to see, and start working about that, thinking about how you're going to get there. Or even another way that you can do it is to think about the Wikipedia page that you want to have in 10 years' time and work backwards. What are the points that we'll be talking about from your business or your people in 10 years' time, and let's work back from there and start to build a story that actually lasts, and also build a relationship at the same time. So some of the pitfalls that you need to avoid, if we move on, quite often we'll see companies saying, I know how to do PR, so-and-so does the PR like this and it works for them, so that's what we're going to do. when we talk to companies, we want to find, as I've said, the unique thing about them. We want to find what's different. And too often, what works for one thing isn't going to work for you. So don't fall into the trap of shouting into the void. This is a really, really important thing. A lot of people think, right, if I just work out what I'm going to say, and then I'll say it often, every month or every 2 weeks, and I'm going to just keep repeating it. And it's just won't work, because you're shouting into a void. There's an awful lot of noise out there, and we want to help you make your messages land. So keep your powder dry for when you've got something to say, and work with people who will tell you when something isn't working, or when actually something isn't a story. So, for instance, you've just hired a great new person who's going to be your chief operating person. They're going to lead your team to fantastic things. I have no doubt about that, but that's not necessarily a story for the tech press. So just sort of think, hold back, hold your fire. Maybe there's a way you can announce it internally and on LinkedIn. That's great. That's social media. That's what it's for, but it's not a news story. So keep your powder dry for when you've got something really big to announce. And then if we move on from there. And then the other thing that we talk to people about a lot is building their own narrative and raising the brand of their business or their personal brand. And it's thinking hard about the topics that they can really own, whether it's as a company or personally. Your key messages, which we want to help you draft, hopefully, you need to be able to use those for months, maybe for years. So you need to be confident in them. You need to care about them. You need to be able to think them through, and then ideally you'll be able to make the journalists care, because you've got to find a reason. They're desperate for a really great story, but they're constantly flooded with not so great stories, and they want to see the needle in the haystack. They need to care about something, and then if they do care about something, if you find that thing that resonates with them, hopefully they'll keep coming back to you, because they'll know that there's something worthwhile there, and there's something that they want to track and trace and follow up on, and a relationship. And education happily really lends itself to that, because you creating something, hopefully it's impactful for good. It's gonna there's a sort of short time frame, then there's a result, and then you start again. So there's a cycle of it, and people will want to know. We see it from this sort of, as we've all just seen in the last week, exam results every single year. There are sort of annual stories that come around, but for education, there are trends that come around, there are stories that come around, there are challenges that come around. How do you educate people in the company when half of them are not regularly attending the office? There are new nuances, and all of these things you can develop and work out at the right time for your PR activities. So then that comes from my final point, that all of your PR activities need to connect. And that's when, you've created these key messages, but then those key messages will be your pathway, your map that helps you find, it is going to contribute to the releases, which will nominally be based around news, but they will take some of the language from your key messaging. Any announcements, any blog posts that you do for LinkedIn or for your own website or for Medium, any events that you speak at should ideally pick up themes and stories that you care about, that you've expressed before. There's a sort of perfect circle of content that we aim for, don't always achieve. It has the same key ideas at the center, but then we'll have news releases, pitches to media, profile pieces, event content, media lunches and discussion panels, all of those different types of and forms of content circling around the key messages at the center. So then, sorry, Hagar, if you move on to my next slide. So one of the first points where we often start working with companies is a first fundraise, and it's a big moment for the company. It's about your credibility and the investor backing that you've achieved. But to be honest, journalists are not so much interested in the fundraise. It's really just a hook to give the journalists a reason why to write about you now. Why now? And when they've got that hook, they can start to explore and tell what you've achieved. and they can discuss where you might go next and what you're going to do with the money, and what's the potential impact that you'd like to have, and place it in the context of bigger issues in the world and what is happening in certain trends. So you've got to have something more than just the numbers to tell reporters, although it does bear repeating that a big number will always get a lot more coverage than a small number. Unfortunately, we're all quite driven by numbers, and the bigger they are, the more likely we're going to go wow. So, but a good agency will help you make sure that you're talking to the right people that are actually going to report your story in the first place, and then keep them interested. And I don't just mean interested with that initial release, but it's really important for us that when we introduce a business through their first fundraise, that's just the beginning, and they need to be thinking, they're already thinking about their second fundraise, but we are too, because we're building a relationship with journalists, and the coverage will go for that first release will happen, but then we'll also try to bring them to meet journalists to sort of prolong the story. And this is the sort of break between news and features that you might hear journalists talking about. And a feature is a more considered piece where people might look at several companies at once, or several themes, or interview someone for longer. And that's the kind of ideal piece that we'd sort of be aiming for after we've already got the news. So news report, short, sharp, shock, lives on the internet for much longer than it used to, but still, has a bit of a shelf life. Longer pieces can be there for years, and people will read them for years these days as well. So let's move on from that one. Yes, so this is what I'm talking about, long-term impact. Online media doesn't have a shelf life anymore. News articles are going to be there for a long time, which is great when it's good news, less good when it's bad news, obviously. But that's why we need to sort of go beyond that initial hit. And we've, sometimes I think of that like a little bit like candy floss. It's great to have, not really good for you. You need something that's got a bit of roughage in it and is going to, the meat, and that's going to be there for longer. And that's where we sort of, that's where you also have to moderate your expectations, because you're not going to come out of the traps and get that kind of coverage straight away. That's where you've built up relationships over years. And when I say years, I really do mean 20 years. I've seen journalists talking to people, and actually there's a couple of them on the screen now. If you go back to that slide on the personal brand building, there you go. So there, I don't know if you recognize these people, but on the top right hand is Saul Klein, who's a VC investor in London for a company called Local Globe, and before that he was at Index Ventures. Long before that he worked for Love Film, which was sold to Amazon. He was a chief executive of Love Film, and he worked at Skype. So he's many years of talking to journalists and getting to know them and having strong relationships with them mean that when he talks to them now, and he talks to them a lot still, and he has a big idea that he wants to talk to them about, they really listen. But it didn't happen overnight. And again, Anne Bowden, she is the CEO of Starling Bank and the co-founder of Starling Bank as well, which has had a lot of success in the UK. And one of my former colleagues at the Times newspaper, where I worked for many years, is her very successful, has done a really good job raising her profile in the last couple of weeks and last couple of years, and working with her. But again, she hasn't just started talking to the media. This has been years and years of building up relationships and getting to know people and really providing them with content that they want and stories that work for them. So sorry, if we just go back a few pages, a couple of slides. So I was talking about long-term impact, and we can go one forward again. Yeah. So when we finished doing the news coverage of your fundraise, then we try to talk about profiles and features, but then we move on also to thought leadership through op-eds and blogs, which is where, again, it's about discussing the ideas that drove you into business in the first place, the challenges that you're facing or that a certain sector is facing, and your solutions for them. If you can write about the ideas and the opinions and bring a critical voice into the conversation, then you can start to lead that conversation. One flaw of op-eds and blogs that we see is that they're far too self-serving. So people are just pack them full of the features that they're doing or the activities that they've done. And really, you kind of need to step back and be the grown-up voice in the room that has the authority to say, you know, this is what I think, this is how it could be better, this is where it's changed, and really give us your opinion, because that's what publications want. They want something that people are going to click on, they want something that's a bit provocative, and they want you to make a point or say something that no one else has said yet, or at least no one else has said recently. So that's one thing that we do quite a lot of work with people on. Creating stories out of data-driven content is really provides a lot of stories for journalists, whether you get the data from your own resources, a lot of people create it themselves, or whether you go and use a polling company to do a survey. Data-driven stories will always have a place in publications. And then there are the more traditional media relations activities where we basically essentially introduce you to the journalists that cover your sector and will want to know about you. And then finally, there's newsjacking, which is inserting you into the conversation so that when a journalist is covering a particular area or aspect or topic in an area, they will come to a range of people to get voices. Often they want voices in opposition, and if you're prepared to make, you know, you've got a pithy quote, you've got a point of view, then you'll do really well in newsjacking, and we can help you sort of find the publications that are going to take that kind of content. So I've skipped forwards and back a little bit. So Hagar, if you go on to the next slide, where we talked about raising your personal brand. So this is something that we do with companies, but that we also do it with people, individuals as well. And it's all about identifying your target audience to help you meet your business objectives. Next slide is about journalists. Just a few pointers there. The guy on the right he's a nice guy. He's a producer at Sky News. He's always inundated. But that just gives you an idea. Business journalists are constantly inundated and time poor. They're looking for good stories, but they really, you know, if they don't get back to you, it's probably because you've got no relationship with them, but also because the story is just not good enough. And there's the sort of fraught difficulty of, you know, whether we chase them up. And we usually do, but only when we know it's good stuff, because they wouldn't thank us. Well, we don't send anything that's bad, but you know, there's no point sending stuff out that isn't worth someone's while, if, you know, especially when they're working flat out to provide a quality product, whether it's broadcast or print or online. Next slide. So the best thing for us to say to you today, I think, is that we want to help you. You know, we want you to help yourself, and PR that is purely transactional will ultimately fail. You know, you're not buying content here. The value of PR is in that it was earned. You've told a great story, you've made some interesting points, and people think that's of value and therefore want to write about you. But you can make it a little bit easier. Journalists love to trade. If you give them some information, tell them something they don't know, they're more inclined to come back to you and give you a hearing. And basically remember that you're building a relationship that you want to last and endure. And it takes time and effort, like any relationship. I don't know if I've got any more slides, but yeah, I mean, the ideal is to aim for becoming an expert that's on speed dial. And then finally, just briefly, but we could talk about this in the conversation, in the discussion afterwards, something that you're probably going to be likely to be approached about as an early stage company is a partnership with a media publication. And that can be of, you know, varying use to you. One thing I would say immediately is you've got to make sure that your potential partner can deliver the audience that's key for you. If their audience doesn't work, isn't aligned with what you're trying to do, there's absolutely no point even having a discussion, because the partnerships in the media world can become quite expensive. I'm sure there's room to negotiate, but they do start off pretty high with it anyway. So define clearly the results that you want to achieve, and then you need to develop a strategic media plan with that partner and negotiate hard, you know. This is content that you're actually paying for, and you need to showcase your strengths. When I say you're paying for it, you may be paying for it in kind, but you're still paying for it because it obviously takes a lot of time, effort, and commitment to provide content to any partner. So you need to sort of judge whether it is actually worthwhile, and then you need to set some metrics to see that you've achieved that. And I think other people can probably talk more effectively about metrics than me. Certainly probably enjoy talking about them more than me. So that's one thing that I would say for partnerships, if you're considering that, and a lot of B2B businesses will, and they can be very effective for B2B businesses, just sort of make sure that you've actually worked out all the costs, and not just the upfront one. You know, your time is the most valuable resource that you've got. So that would be me, and hopefully we can carry on this conversation through the panel discussion.
Thank you so much, Angela. Let's see if I can get back to my screen here. Amazing insights you're covering, obviously, both from the agency side and from the journalist side. So I think we should be well ready to bring on the startups and start the conversation. I'll just find Marie, and let's see here. Adding a spotlight to Marie and to Christina, and maybe to myself. There we go. And I think before I start asking any questions, I will let the other two ladies introduce themselves a little bit more than I did to begin with, and what you're doing. So let's start with you, Marie, the founder of Iconoclast.
Let's go. Thank you, Ege. Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you. I'm Mary Take. I'm French, and I'm the CEO and founder of Iconoclast. So basically, it's a sales and business development bootcamp, accessible to everyone because our students are paying when they get a job. We are in France and in the UK, and we used a lot of press coverage. So maybe I can talk about my little experience. Yeah, nice to meet you.
Thanks a lot, Marie. And then moving to Spain and the north of Spain with Christina. Genially.
Hello, good afternoon. Thanks, Het, for the introduction. And it was amazing, your presentation, Angela. So I'm Christina Marcos. I'm the head of PR, global PR events and media at Genially, which is a startup that develops a tool to create interactive and animated content. We have we target like different markets such as education, corporates and designers. So we have like this Edtech background, but also the corporate background. And we are mostly globally. So we are like now doing a lot of PR efforts around the globe.
That's amazing, and I'm looking forward to getting the conversation started rather than me just asking the questions. And obviously, Angela, you've answered a lot of my questions already. Also, I've seen a lot coming into the chat, so I'm very sure that this will be a very fruitful and helpful conversation for all of us. But Christina, you were touching on like how you work globally with the media, and you've been doing this for a while. Angela was touching a lot on like how it's taking time, it's building up over time, the cold outreach, it's hard to kind of get in touch with, and now focusing mainly on the media and the so-called deserved coverage. Like, how do you start? Like you build up a relationship, but like that first one, how do you kind of even get the attention in the beginning?
Yes, so some time ago, I was listening to a podcast that used the phrase that was spray and pray. And I think there's nothing like more interesting than this concept, because when you're a startup, you need to really try and test your pitch. And because at the first time, you don't know what works or what media can be interested about. You are competing with big companies. There are, as Angela was saying, there are a lot of news and great stories going around. related to tech, to edtech, and all that stuff. So you really need to like create your story and try to reach the media that will be willing to publish you. So you really need to know what your user persona is, what your audiences are, and then start like trying to look at those media and try to build those relationships with journalists. It's not only about, I don't know, using a PR distribution tool, but it's also about like getting to the point of this relationship. For example, here in Spain, we work a lot with Business Insider because we've been like building this relationship with different journalists in Business Insider. So it's about like trying and testing your pitch and trying to connect with those journalists. I don't know, maybe during events, try to take a coffee with the journalists, try to know what type of stories they are interested about and these type of things. So you can really continue to send them some news or stories that they can be interested in.
That's brilliant, Christina. And how about you, Marie? Like you're a little bit of a earlier stage startup, but you've managed to get some great coverage as well. Can you tell us a little bit about the experience and how you worked initially to create that, and how you're building on it now moving forward?
Yeah, first thing first, I think it's totally normal to struggle at the beginning when you are no one, nobody, when you don't have any money. I think it's kind, to have your first articles. It's like to close your first deal. Like it can be hard, so it's normal, guys. If you are struggling, we did, and I think everyone did. So for our first article, actually, we had really like no money at all at this time. It was like 3 years ago. So I went on Google and I searched all the articles that I liked around our subject, like education or business school or this kind of stuff. So I kept like, I don't know, 200 articles. I found the name of the journalist because in general, you can see it at the end of the articles. I tried to find their emails, and basically I reached out like, cold mailing. And I think one thing that Angela said, it's like personalization. So when you reach out a journalist, you have to really personalize your message. Basically talking a little bit about his article means that really you are not only interested into having a coverage, but really like building a relationship, and you are really into this subject, and you are the expert of this subject, and so they have to have you just have to become like kind of an evidence. And for that I tried to write a press release. It's kind of hard when it's not your job, but yeah, if you have like a cool story or like big names, or I don't know, innovation, number of clients, like something that can interest not only on yourself but like the market. And I think you can have journalists with like a mainstream news or a mainstream topic, like everyone can understand your topic. It's kind of important, because if you are too deep into your subject, maybe they will not get it. And yeah, when you start to have like 1 or 2 coverage at the beginning, it can be only like specified. For example, like on education, it can be like a specified article on education in a magazine, or I don't know, in a media specialized in education. At the beginning, it's easier to have this kind of coverage. When you have 2 or 3, you can try to have like top tier coverage, and this is how we did it. And when we started to have like a very good coverage in France, we hired a freelance. So basically it was 3K a month, 3K a month. And we kept him for 3 months, so he can, call back the journalist and really handle your topic. Yeah, after when you start to have like a 10 or 20, I have this subject, I can put you into this article. So yeah, the very first one are the hardest one, but yeah, when you get it, it's getting really easier.
Amazing. So I hear you learning by doing and starting on your home turf. I suppose it's brick by brick, isn't it? Rather than trying to do it all at the first time. So it's very good advice, Marie.
Yeah, maybe I can add something. I
of
don't
course.
know if you talk about it, Angela, but in the UK, for example, because in France it was kind of easy. I mean, it took like 4 months, but to have a big one. But in the UK, it was really harder. And we tried to sponsor an article in a top tier journal newspaper. And actually, it worked pretty well to get articles after that. So I don't know, Angela, if it's something that works in general or if it was just luck. But yeah, actually.
It is actually probably worth trying. My feeling is that sometimes you make say there's a responsibility on companies that are growing up in a particular sector to kind of care for the media that covers that sector. And back in the day, I started in the restaurant and hospitality business, and also I'm then moved into the real estate world. So I've covered lots and lots of very different industries as a journalist. And what we do say to clients, and not always the startups, more likely to be the VC investors, is that you have to contribute to the media that are covering your sector. Otherwise, it's not going to survive. So I do think there is a point where if you do pay for contributed articles, people start to take you seriously. There's just a little bit of respect, and as a journalist, I find it slightly, or as a former journalist, I find it slightly tricky that you kind of sort of, there is a way to sort of buy coverage. But I think it's also the reality of the industry now, the media industry, and that, they are just as much as anyone, they need revenue to survive, and they take their revenue from different places. So I think it can help you to get that foot in the door. I would just say, make sure it's the right audience, because you don't want to be, because you're essentially using some of your marketing budget, and you wouldn't put marketing budget in without measuring the impact. So make sure you're getting the impact from contributed articles as well.
Yeah.
Great, Angela, and it's a good reminder to not forget that it's not always us running after the journalist and they're in all the power, because obviously it's a mutual beneficial relationship that we all need each other. So that's a great reminder. Did you have any comments, Christina, on that, or no? Right. We've got questions coming up. We'll definitely return a little bit more to what we're discussing now on sort of how to approach media, how to get the coverage, what will the costs be. But I just want to take one little step back to even before the how, and ask the founders and Christina a little bit about the why. Why is it important to secure the media coverage, in particular, of course, publicity as well, not just focus on product, but like why is it important to also be there in the public space? You want to
start if you want. So I think it's about like building and creating relevance for your brand. So maybe doing PR efforts is not something that is going to drive huge sales or something like that. But when you need to enter a market or enter a new sector, etc., it's a good way to start by trying to do PR. As in the end, when a journalist is writing about you, you normally tend to think it's not something that is paid. However, when you are doing ads, social media, and you're using your own channels, it's like you are more like controlling your message. So I think people has more confidence on what others write about you than what you really write about your company, because okay, you're gonna say that your company is the best one and these kind of things, but a journalist is gonna do some research, talk about your competitors and these kind of things. So I think it's really, really important to do PR efforts if you want to make your brand something relevant around the world.
Brilliant. And how about you, Marie? Why have you chosen to put some time and effort and money even into focusing on the PR side?
Yeah, I think it depends of the business, but on education, when you are on a mass market like target, I think it's impossible to avoid it. For example, with Iconoclast, so basically I was nobody, we don't have a diploma, we are a school, we have no students, nobody knows us. So nobody can take you seriously if you are just trying to close these people, but they just saw you on the internet because you were good in Google Ads and you are at the top, So as Christina said, I think like it gives you credibility when people are saying, yeah, this is a very nice school, you have to go there. And when you are a school, the parents, can see that you are really serious because you are in media, even if sometimes it's not really, a lot of companies are in the media, but they are still scams. So sometimes it's a bit strange. And for us, it was a way to speak to a lot of people, but not only to our target, because, for example, if your mother, again, read something about Iconoclast, maybe she will speak about Iconoclast to someone else, to someone else, to someone else. And this someone else, I cannot address it with my Google Ads or with my Instagram, I don't know. So yeah, basically I would say it depends of the business. You can have risk also to speak to journalists because I don't know, you do not control what they will tell about you. So if you don't speak right, or I don't know, if they understand something or want to do assumption, it can be a risk too. But in our case, honestly, B2C mass markets, you just cannot avoid it. And sometimes we had our very first customers thanks to media, for example, thanks to BFM TV in France. So yeah, for us, it's like our ride or die since the beginning. And I think we will continue to use it in as a channel, as a real channel in acquisition.
Amazing. Angela, do you have anything to comment on the approach and the reasons why these companies have chosen to focus this much on profiling? Well, Angela,
I think people come to us for lots of different reasons, and it's also the other thing about PR is it isn't always continuous. When you're at this sort of growing stage, you might find that you have to, you have a stop-start approach. We do work on projects, and then when business sort of imperatives change, then the project might sort of ease off. But generally, once you get to a certain size, there's a requirement for you to continue talking to your customers. But also, you can't just talk to your customers through social media, because everyone can see that in the round, and there may be specific things that you want to say, so you need to find a way of communicating. And then as you get bigger and more successful, you need to protect your reputation. So there's this kind of growth curve where the requirement to do PR is probably quite low when you're starting out, but it does get bigger. And obviously, we've got some of the biggest companies in the world do seem to have incredibly huge PR departments. So it just sort of it does kind of almost create its own flywheel, actually. So at the beginning, though, you can dip in and out, and I would just say try to focus on the key moments, because there aren't that many of them in the life of a startup to scale up. There aren't that many milestone announcements. If you think that in the past few years, a typical fast growing tech company would do a fundraising announcement maybe every 18 months, maybe getting closer as it comes to IPO. So and those are the big stories for them. Obviously, they all want to talk about product stories and things like that, but sometimes, depending on the product, they can be incredibly difficult to place. So really, there aren't that many stories along the way. So you've kind of got to focus on those key moments, and that does mean that when you're in the early stage, you can dip in and out. But for the longer term, if you're doing something where you want to build relationships for the long term, you want to get to be known, and you want the journalists who are writing about a sector to know you and to keep going back to you, that it just pays to have sort of constant interaction rather than coming in and out, really.
Thanks a lot, Angela. I can see in the chat that we have a very direct question when it relates to cost, and I just want to integrate that into also like in what ways you are. I mean, and you're touching on it on the sort of what different stages a startup and when to start thinking of it, but like in it, like a few examples of how you can work with the different types of startups or companies, and then obviously the cost will be related to how much.
I think that one thing that and I think, was it Christina, you mentioned some cost, or maybe it was Mary, but and it wasn't dissimilar to what you might get here in the UK, and I think you mentioned €3,000 for some work, which is probably the starting point, frankly. I think, what you're buying when you buy agency support is a team working for you, and they tend to charge by the hour. So, just as you'll pay your solicitors by the hour, or, a business consultant by the hour, you would pay a PR agency in the same way. So there is sometimes some confusion where people think that they've bought, the amount they pay each month will guarantee a certain amount of coverage. It doesn't really do that. What it guarantees is the hours. And when the job can actually be very hard, and it takes a lot more hours. So you can do, if the story doesn't naturally sell itself, if it's harder to place, then the hours rack up, obviously. So I think at your stage that a lot of you are at, you're probably looking between €3,000 and €6,000. And then you've got bigger businesses that would be looking between sort of 6,000 to 10,000 a month. So that obviously you can think about where that might fit in your marketing spend. It's that and that is basically the agency support as well. But if you'll have costs on top of that. For instance, photography is something that we haven't talked about at all. When you do your first fundraising story, it's really good to have, it's very important to have really good photography. Sometimes it can actually make you get, that is the reason you get coverage, because you've had a great photo, basically. But it's also, there will be other kind of costs involved. So you put on an event, there are costs involved, as you know. But generally, budget, I would say that you can get startup PR coverage, which is regularly talking to a PR consultant once a week, and getting a planned program of work that results in possibly 2 to 3 pieces of coverage, news coverage from a story, or 2 to 3 profiles in a quarter, and 2 op-eds from €5,000 to €8,000. But you can do a sort of cut price version for less. And I shouldn't really be talking about these costs like this, but one thing that you should possibly talk about is doing a project with an agency to see how you like each other, because it's all about relationships. And if you don't really like each other, then you're not going to get the best out of them. And if you go in and you'd say, like, I want to do a project with you, they might charge you more initially, but it might work out better for you in the long run. And we would quite often quote on a project basis for your first fundraising release. And by that, I don't mean your seed fundraise. I mean your first proper Series A, basically. So I hope that's helpful.
Brilliant. Anyone want to comment on that, or move on?
And I think working with PR agencies or PR freelancers doesn't need to be assumed as a cost, because it's really an investment, because in the end you're building your brand, and who knows how much it's going to cost your brand and value your brand in 10 years, for example. So it's not something that maybe you're not going to see the results in the first month or in the 6 first months, but then you start you enter in that wheel, and you start really seeing that you are on the media, that journalists are contacting you, and these kind of things. So to me, working and investing in PR efforts is something that is really good. Maybe if you don't see the results, even if you don't see the results in the, I don't know, first week.
Yeah,
and maybe
I was gonna just respond to, there's a comment on the chat there, and I mean, obviously I'm gonna be talking up the value of an agency, but I think there is a sort of genuine mix of use for people in-house and agency. So you can hire somebody for a lot less and have them in-house, and then they do all of their work. But if you think about it, one person doing all of that work is quite difficult. And the benefit of an agency is that you're in the network, and you're benefiting from the flow of stuff that comes in. So we've got many different clients covering different things. So we hear about so many more opportunities, and we have so many more regular interactions with media. One person couldn't do all of that. And as a client, you're benefiting from that flow of information and being in that network, really. So that's the difference. But also, as agencies, we really like to work with good in-house people, because basically working just with a founder or just for the CEO, it can be very difficult. They haven't got the time to do PR. So we don't get the material that we need, and therefore, so we need both. You need an in-house. Eventually, you'll have the resources to have an in-house person and an agency, but there's definitely a room for both in there.
Wonderful. And Marie, did you want to also chip in a comment?
I just wanted to say that in the beginning, because even in London, we took like someone to work on our PR. But if you don't have a lot of budget, it's easier to go with freelance, just to have like top 2 or 3 tier media. You will not have the biggest one, because in general, the agency gets you the biggest one. But it's cool to start. And so you have some pieces to show to an agency, or to top 1 tier media, sorry. So yeah, I would say if the budget is something very, very important for you, because even if you are building a brand, etc., at the beginning, when you don't have money, you just don't have money. So start with a freelance with 1K or 2K, like during I don't know, 3 months, and if it works well, you can go bigger after. It's always cool to test how the journalist likes your topic or not, because at the beginning, if you spend 10K the first month and you get nothing, and that's true that agency cannot like guarantee you to have coverage, because it's not their topic, their company, it's yours actually, so they cannot guarantee you. I think it's easier to start like with a low budget. And after with the agency, we are asking for a weekly call, and it's cool because you can you feel how your subject is going on the market, and if the agency is transparent, they will tell you, okay, maybe we can do like a new press release on this new topic or this new topic. Like if you start to work with an agency as a CEO or as a CMO, you have to be really like on the fire with them to provide them as much content as they need, and so they can pitch you very well. And I think, Angela, you said something, or Christina, you said something about to like the person who will pitch your ID. I think it's very, very important to choose a person that fits your value and your branding, because in general, if people don't really like your message or feel your message, they will not pitch you good, and it can. It will be a disaster with the journalists.
Completely agree. And also, I think just to add, because I'm really, I really think the same as Angela and Marie. For example, if you want to enter a new market, or even if you have someone that in-house works for the PR, as it is in my case, but then you need to, I don't know, maybe be published in the US, and you don't know the market, it's really helpful to have this freelance or agency to help you to like make this message really appealing in some complex markets as the US or Brazil, or this kind of markets where it's not as easy as maybe your local market.
Yeah, and that is true. That every market's different, and you're going to have better results if you pitch in the right language and you have someone who knows the nuances and local customers. Yeah.
Fantastic. Some really, really good advice on there. And I realize we're speaking quite a lot on like what we're putting in terms of costs and efforts. And I also appreciate that this is a very, very hard space to measure. But do you have any good insights on kind of how you, like what metrics, how do you measure your return on those investments beyond obviously the cuttings or the press coverage that you can actually count?
It's really hard to give KPIs, I guess. I'm trying to think about our last press release. I think if we have less than 3 hits or 3 journalists interesting into our press release, I think it's because we just fucked up the story or it was not interesting enough. So I would say for a press release, it's cool to have at least 3 journalists that are interesting. They will not all write or call you for an interview. But yeah, and as I said, I think it's really, really important to be quick. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And if you tried like to, I don't know how many journalists with your agency and it doesn't work, you just have to move fast and find another angle or story or type of media. But yeah, it's just my story, honestly. Maybe Angela, you have better KPIs or way of measuring your work.
We get asked quite a lot for KPIs, and it is really difficult. There are various tools that some people ask us about. You can buy them, the likes of Meltwater. They give you some idea of analytics and share of voice, but actually they don't really tell you much at the end of the day, because it's not a science as such. And I think there's quite a lot of we're not really sure who reads things, and we know that things get shared a lot. And if you're really working hard with your media, you can achieve a content in a publication, and then you can reuse that content by repurposing it and sharing it on social media. So you're going to get a sort of double bang for your buck in any way. But we do try to give some KPIs, and then obviously we try to stick to them. But we have to say it's not exact, and you have to accept that things don't necessarily work. And I just sort of, as a sort of little insight, in terms of we do try stories before they go out fully. So we might give them to somebody who's quite, a sympathetic journalist who covers the sector. We might say, what do you think of this? And if they come back and say, yeah, it'd be quite interesting, but it'd be more interesting with this, then we're quite open to pivoting. And, quite often with just a small tweak that makes it more suitable for them. And that might lead down the exclusive route, but it can also work for an embargo. So you might go to, maybe not everyone knows what that is, but with an embargo, you'd normally be pitching all publications at the same time, but you can sort of say, let's just see how this is going to go by going to one person first and seeing their reaction. Obviously, if they love it, you'll be thinking, oh, I should have just gone everywhere. But you can also, sometimes they love it because it's perfect for them and you just got the right person at the right time. So it's not clear, really. But I would always err on the side of trying to make kind of multiple uses of something. So then if somebody turns around and says, well, that only got X coverage, you can say, yes, but it was also this, this, and this, and therefore we got more out of it.
I think one of the things that makes it like harder to measure, it's because if we think about PR as just one action, because you are the only thing you do is launch a press release once a year because you have a fundraising or something like that, then it's really difficult to see how PR impacts in your business. However, if you really think that PR is something that is really related to your marketing strategy, and you have a plan that I don't know, maybe you are going to an event to present a new feature, but then you are going to launch a press release and then you are going to pay for branded content, and you're going to do Google Ads. And when you close all these different actions, you can have like different metrics, because you know where you have been mentioned in the press, but also what bloggers have been speaking about you, how many people has, I don't know, come into your stand or booth in an event, and this kind of, and then you can like say, okay, this campaign has brought us, I don't know, whatever. But if the only thing you do is, okay, I'm going to launch this press release, the only thing you can say is, okay, I'm published in 3 great media, and estimate the audience of that media, but it's not, as Angela was saying, it's not that exact. So you really need to like take everything into account, and not only the PR itself.
Yeah, it's a full package, isn't it? Like with a lot of other things that we do. Just conscious of time, because we did not do any breakout rooms and we're a bit short, and an amazing conversation. We've got loads of questions and comments in the chat. I think we've touched on most of the topics that have been asked about, to be honest, even though it's not been like direct questions, but the way I can see it. So I think I'm gonna start wrapping up by asking all 3 of you for like your sort of key takeaway or key advice to other founders, marketing people, communications people, whoever out there in the session and beyond, what you want them to take away from our chat. If you want to maybe start, Christina.
Okay, so to me, the key is brand building, whether if it is personal brand or your business brand. Try to really know your brand, your values, what your message are, and then really try to consider PR as a good effort to make your brand relevant and to be well known in every market.
Excellent. Yeah. Thank you very much. And Marie?
Me, I will say, I don't know what to say in English, but like, be catchy. Like in general, with Iconoclast, we are even pushing too much sometimes, but you know, we are trying to be a bit abrasive. And in France, we have something. We have something. It's very rude, so I will not say that. But when you have to click on the article, it's because the article says something totally like crazy. And we are trying to use very catchy sentence or something a bit crazy sometimes, but in general journalists love that. And even if sometimes you can have a bad buzz or I don't know what, if someone is talking about you, they are talking about you, so in a sense it can be good.
All PR is good PR. That's great. Be a bit provocative. Yeah. Excellent, Marie. And Angela, I'll leave.
This is quite a challenge actually, and it's sort of making me think about how to redo my presentation. So I'm going to have to go away and do some more homework. The main thing that I would say is think about a relationship, and your relationship, building a relationship as well as building a brand. This is you want relationships that last for 10, 20 years. And the way to do that is to be non-transactional with your information. So you're providing a great story and great content, but you're also sort of appreciating the journalist's craft and helping them, maybe, when it's not in your interest, you're introducing them to someone who will also be able to help them. Or you might be providing them with a data point that isn't necessarily talking up your business, but just that it would be useful for them in their line of work. So these are just small ways that you can show that you're on their side. And the agency role or the PR's role is kind of to mediate that relationship between the client and the journalist. But the best journalists really want to get that one-to-one relationship with the founder or the CEO, and at some point the PR will step away and let that happen. But if you're the CEO that wants to achieve that, then you've got to be able to sort of be a grown-up person in the room that can talk responsibly to journalists and isn't, you know, a danger when they walk in the room. So that's my thing. I'd say think about relationships. But then my second thing is, especially for a startup businesses, think about the content that you've already got within your business. Think about the data that you've got in your business already and how you can leverage that to bring it out to new audiences, and how you can slice and dice it for new audiences. And I met a really interesting business this morning, which was very focused on collecting business data, which it could use for its sales and marketing funnel, and would actually drive its investment business. But ultimately, they knew that that was also going to be of interest to journalists. And I'm hoping, because they see the value in the regular content and regular reports and putting themselves out there, that they're going to let us use some of that proprietary data. And obviously there are rules around privacy and what you use, etc. But you probably already have interesting stuff in your business already that people would like to hear about, and, you know, try and uncover that.
Amazing. Thank you so much, all three of you. So it's all about building profile, it's about building relationships, having good content and being consistent and just working hard and being a bit bold sometimes, I can read. I hope the attendees out there have learned as much as I have, and I can't thank the three of you enough, Marie, Angela and Christina. This is recorded, so if anyone wants to watch back, hopefully you will. We'll share the recording. We finished day 2 of the Brighteye Edtech Startup Festival. We've got 3 days to go, 8 more events. But this has been absolutely amazing to me. So thanks again, the 3 of you. Thanks again, everyone, for joining and for watching.
Lovely to meet you. And thanks for all the questions.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.